Good afternoon. You are with Nancy Flemming for Money and Motivation, along with Mark Winsor and Joe. And today we have our special guest, Douglas Wolf, who is a Pinell County assessor. That means the man in charge of why our property taxes keep going up. I thought he'd be really endearing today. So we will get started in just a minute. First, I wanted to start today with a money moment, because sometimes people make bad financial decisions. Have any of you gentlemen ever made a financial decision you later regretted?
Just today, as a matter of fact. Yes.
Just today. That's great. I won't even ask you what it is.
Hey, how do you spell assessor, Doug?
A-S-S-E-S-S-O-R.
No jokes.
Not at all, believe me.
So we're going to go from there, because a lot of people make bad financial mistakes. The kind that reach the news most often are the ones where people are chasing a return, and they hear something that's hot and they want to go buy it. The recent housing market was one example. Does anybody here know why that happens?
Emotion runs wild.
Emotion runs wild. That has a lot to do. That has to do with the way our brain is put together. I went to a workshop recently, and they were talking about how we have our prefrontal cortex and we have the lizard brain, which is the back part of the brain, which is the bigger part of the brain. And that's a part of the brain that dictates a lot of our decisions. So the way we think about it is we think about, from Star Trek.
Beam me up.
Beam me up, Dr. Spock and Captain Kirk. Now, let me ask you this. If you were making a money decision, which one of those men would you want to have in your corner?
Between Spock and Kirk?
Yes.
Oh, for sure, Spock.
Exactly. You're making a money decision.
Oh, I just like his ears.
There we go. You see the lizard brain at work. So what we're looking at here, but too many times we think about things with this lizard brain, which again is the older part of our brain. So Jill, let me ask you this: if I were to give you $10 right now, right here, right at the end of the show, or $11 tomorrow, which would you take?
$10 whole dollars? I would take the 10 now. But if the offer was $1 million now or $1,000,001 tomorrow, I'd wait till tomorrow.
$1,001?
Yeah, $1,001.
No. What are you saying?
Like $1 million. I'm making a correlation there.
I know. So
$1,100,000.
100,000. Okay.
I'd wait the extra day.
You
but for $10, the extra dollar I just figured I'd snag from you when you were outside.
But that is perfect, because the $10, because really, $10 today or $11 tomorrow is still a 10% increase. So what we do is we weigh our immediate gratification against the cost. So for you, $100,000 is worth waiting the day, because we're motivated by fear or greed. So the greed outweighs the fear that the extra $100,000 might not come.
I'd probably wait for $75 till tomorrow.
You might wait for $75.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be afraid I wouldn't show up?
Well, I'd keep you
Give
here.
it to you. You just put me back in that cage that I see back there, right?
Right, that's the one under the ground? Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one I was thinking about, yeah. And so, but what happens is that people then make these money decisions based upon this emotion, because of this old brain that we have going, this animal brain, which makes it important for us instead to bring their cerebral cortex to the forefront when we're making our money decisions. And one of the ways we can do this is to first figure out what we want. And in other words, we're not making a snap decision, and to write it out. And this is why people with written plans end up being much more successful than people who don't have a written plan. If you have a written plan, you can look at it. If you have a written plan, you know where you're going to go. You know that you're going to have a reason. So if you have some type of spontaneous idea come, like my daughter just sent me a text. I'm going to go visit my daughter. Hey, Mom, do you want to go get this gel nail treatment when you come visit? I text back, cost. And it's like $30. And I'm thinking, do I want to get a gel nail treatment for $30 when I'm on vacation and I'm going to be playing everywhere? Probably not. But if I hadn't just sat down and redid all of my goals, I might have said, sure, it's with my daughter. Why not? I'll go do it. Because, again, our fear and our greed and the fun and the emotion and all of that enters in. And so it's really important when we write things out, we write our budgets, we write what we're going to spend our money on, and that gives us a cause to stick with it. Does anybody here have a written plan?
Yes, don't spend anything.
That's a good one.
It's tough a little eating that way, but
I was going to say it's sort of like taking a diet.
More weight by this time.
Yes, it's sort of like I was just going to say it's like going on a diet and saying I will never eat again.
Right.
I will never spend again. So no, it has to be within reason. But I find that people who sit down and figure things out and where they want to go and what they want their retirement to look like or what they want, their housing situation to look like. And the biggest time we saw this fear was what you had on earlier, the housing market. When the housing market went up, so many people were so afraid they would miss out, and they were so greedy that they could get the better house that now, look, we all know what happened. Whereas those who stayed with their plan and ignored the housing market and steadily just kept working towards paying down their mortgage, you see, those are the people we look at today and say, oh, wow, they were pretty smart, weren't they? When in reality, they just locked into what made sense, and they didn't go with the lizard brain. Instead, they went with the newer part of their brain. So that's our thought for today.
Well, assuming that there's no inflation, of course, you're right about the housing market. And there was inflation in the housing market, but not as much in, the other parts of the economy. So relative to the dollars you have in the bank, for a period of time, it made more sense to leverage yourself in the housing market.
If a person, and that's where I disagree, because if a person is attempting to have financial security, the basis of financial security is housing, and having a house that's paid for or having a house with a low payment gives more protection in the unforeseen waters ahead, reduced income or being off of work or inflation, because if inflation goes up, you still have to make your house payment. And history has kind of borne this out as far as financial solvency is concerned.
Well, I'm just saying is that there's always an opportunity cost, and people, you're right, they became amateur investors in housing without looking at, okay, is this going to go on? Of course, people always think whatever is happening today will continue into the foreseeable future, and we both know that's not what happens. There are cycles to every market. So it's just a matter of timing, and timing is a very risky thing to do and only should be practiced by experts.
Well, and even experts. What I find is interesting is that risk takers, we think of them as successful entrepreneurs that we admire when they're winning. But when, the word risk means there's a potential downside, and if the downside hits, then they're the scoundrels and the bankrupt individuals and the ones we point fingers at. That's just what happens in our society. I've had so many people come through my office who were doing so well for so many years with risk-taking during good markets, but when the market turned, eventually it ate their lunch.
But then they're not necessarily scoundrels. They're just risk takers.
I don't think they're scoundrels, but society looks at them that way. Now,
I don't know. I think risk is inherent in the American culture, and we admire people who take risks and sometimes make it.
I can tell you, having sat in that chair on the other side of attorneys who represent the banks, they're looked at as scoundrels by those, I'm telling you.
Well, of course, banks and lawyers look at them that way because they lost money, but the bank took a risk too.
Well, and I hear talk show hosts, not me, but I hear other talk show hosts criticizing those who file bankruptcy, criticizing those who buy and bail, criticizing those who walk away from housing without buying and bailing. I hear a lot of that. That's out there. I mean, we do look at those. Is there not a bad stigma to someone who files bankruptcy?
It depends, I think. If it's a business bankruptcy, somebody who's making an investment, they bought 10 houses and it went south on them, that's a roll of the dice. Somebody who's willing to back them. If it's someone who buys a house and is not responsible and just spends all their money and they lose their only place to live, then you have a different stigma, I think, and a different view. It depends on the intent of the investor at the time the investment was made and what they did with it.
That's a nice answer, but in the real world, there is a social stigma. There are a lot of places where you go, and if you fill out applications, they're going to ask you if you declared bankruptcy. And yours has a valid point.
In fact, I think you got a great attitude, and I wish everybody had that. I'm just telling you, everybody doesn't.
They do not.
I was at the House of Representatives talking to one of the members of our House of Representatives who said he just didn't believe in bankruptcy. He thought everybody who filed bankruptcy was bad, that there was no reason. I said, well, what about somebody who just gets hit with a lot of medical bills? No, they should pay it. What about somebody who's out there building our economy with business and something happens that's out of their control and their business? Well, they're responsible. They should pay it. We should not allow them. It was just against bankruptcy.
Well, that's crazy because
that's what I was thinking.
The founding fathers put it in the law because they didn't want debtors' prisons in this country like they left England. And so they recognize people make mistakes. They don't stick to their plan or whatever it is.
Or maybe they're with their plan, but like you said, they get a little over-aggressive. I mean, let's suppose that
the lizard shows up, and there you go.
The lizard shows up when people over-leverage. whatever they purchase.
Well,
And
but I do tell people that same thing. I had a call even today from somebody who I've been representing for a couple of months, trying to help them through a short sale without having a huge deficiency, and they're facing about a $75,000 deficiency on a second that won't agree to let it go in the short sale. Now, $75,000 for some people is not a lot, but for him, that's a big dollar amount. And my point was the one you're making, that, you know what? You weren't the one out there destroying the market. You're hurt by it. It's not a shameful thing to finally say, to take care of your family, you need to do a bankruptcy in your situation.
Well, I understand the part about bankruptcy, and maybe what I'm looking at is more, because I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, is that I see people who go out and try to create jobs and businesses, and they file a business bankruptcy, maybe in a different category than someone who files a personal bankruptcy, which it all depends on the circumstances. But I think 80% of the people are responsible, but the 20% ruin it for everyone else. I mean, because they've like, there used to be people would go to medical school or law school and then go bankrupt on their federal loans, right? And of course, we had to pass a law to stop that, because people just said, I have no more ethics anymore. Like this member of the House or Senate, whoever said,
House,
said, bankruptcy is always bad.
Always, yeah. He drew the line and said there's never an exception.
Well, then he didn't read the Constitution.
Okay. I tell you what, I disagree with him as well.
I do
but,
too.
It's very frustrating because what I find is that everybody's circumstances are different. It's so hard to judge when your eye is looking from the outside in. That's my point. It is true, Nancy, that so many times people make decisions for finances without thinking through the whole thing. That is true. But a lot of times we encourage risk-taking from the onset. All this started when you made the comment of leverage is good at a good time. We encourage as a society risk-taking and leverage, because leverage is just debt, right? That's all it is. Leverage is debt.
Right.
My attitude's actually changed quite a bit over the last 5 years, having dealt with so many good people who found themselves over-leveraged. I'm kind of leery about leverage. A lot of times when it would have made sense before, I just don't believe in it anymore. I think we overuse it as a country.
Well, that may be true. I'm thinking back to when Carter was president from 76 to 80, in that period. If you didn't leverage yourself, inflation ran at about 10 to 11% per year up until about 1982, when Reagan deflated the whole economy. If you didn't, your money was worth less every day. And so you were a fool if you didn't have hard assets and you didn't borrow money cheaply and leverage it back out. And now we're in a low inflationary period of history, maybe deflationary. Who knows how long it'll last? The way they're printing money, we don't know. So, everybody's watching. What's the tipping point? Will they inflate? Will they inflate? Will they inflate? So then you have to look at, okay, if it does switch the other way, we become inflationary, then having hard assets leveraged at cheap rates is a good thing to be. It just depends on the time.
Except I still hear from those who remember way back when, many of the retirees today built their nest egg on that double-digit CD rate because they weren't leveraged, and so they were able to stay under the radar a little bit with inflation because they either had their house paid for, they had the low payments, they were able to manage money. You know what I'm talking about. We're talking about people who know how to make a dime squeak, which would be our World War II and our Depression-era people, and they looked at those high CD rates and stayed under inflation and still built a nest egg that stayed ahead of inflation simply without any risk in going into CDs. And still talk about it today, about remember when. And that gave the banks a great reputation, which they've lost, but for many years, that's what made people so loyal to the banks. Was
we had a
those high
caller
CD
call
rates.
in, is that right?
Yeah, with a comment. Pete from Apache Junction said, Nancy, great guest. Doug is a terrific guy, will make a great assessor. How much did you pay for that one?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to have someone in the audience you pay to call in.
You gotta love that, huh?
Okay, well, tell
Pete,
us
thanks
about
a lot. I owe you that beer.
Tell us what an assessor does.
Well, and
Because-
also you announced it as if he is the assessor. You're actually running
You're
for
not the assessor.
That's right. So those of you out there that
he's
are...
not the assessor.
Not yet.
So get
Not
out.
yet the assessor. Is there anyone running against?
What am I doing here?
Is there anyone running against you?
Yes.
You do have an opponent, so it's not
I have
a
several,
given.
actually.
I believe
Oh.
the guy running against him works at Fry's in the meat cutting department.
He's in the deli.
The deli, sorry.
That's on the primary side. I have a Republican primary opponent, which
Okay, so
will
what
be
made you
determined.
decide you wanted to be the county assessor?
Well, I'm the best qualified to have the job.
How is that?
Because I have 25 years of residential and commercial real estate experience as in the software side and in the brokerage side, so I know all about it. And the assessor's office essentially does two things, which is works in real estate and has to have aggregate data in databases in order to come up with a value so they can present you in the mail and say, pay up.
Doug,
So
the real question, Doug, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Can you slice meat really thin without it being shaved?
No,
but
I
then
don't have that talent.
So is the other guy
I'm
really
a
working the
fixer.
No,
deli?
you know what? I swear, I went to Fry's the other day, and I'll never forget that debate I went to because the other guy running for assessor was memorable.
Wait. So let's get this straight.
He's,
So
on the,
actually-
he's on the Republican ticket
so the
against
other
me.
Republican person, I'm not in Pinal County.
He
so I'm
slices
catching up.
slices meat, and he made
Literally.
me very unhappy because he made my meat too thick. First of all, and then he said, when I asked
Personal
him,
insult.
I said, you know what? I said, I almost considered voting for you for assessor, but this meat's way too thick, dude. And he took a break.
All
What can I
right,
say?
All right.
But
So
that
now-
wasn't true. I really didn't consider it.
Now we know what it takes. So there's only two running. I take it.
But then after the 28th of August,
Yes.
which is the primaries for all the state, there is someone on the Democratic side of the ticket that I will
Okay.
face in the general election, assuming I get through the primary.
Okay. And that person works at somewhere better than not
With
better
nose.
than- with more experience.
With nose,
I mean,
right?
I can say it's not a bad thing to work in a deli, but that certainly doesn't give a person experience to be a county assessor for crying out loud.
Well, I wouldn't make that judgment.
I can
I'd let the
make it.
voters
That's
decide
Right,
what
exactly.
they want
His
to do.
father's also running for something. I forget.
County district supervisor here for this area.
What. Oh, wow. Gotcha.
Okay, well, I don't know who
It's
they are.
a team.
I can just.
It is a team.
It is true that I'm very interested in your background because the assessor position, you oversee a lot of money.
Well, actually, it's kind of there's you
The
don't
income of the money.
you set the value for the properties that then is assessed.
Sure, but that determines the money.
Yes, you give it to the county board and they decide how much they're going to charge for what the asset base is.
Sure, but you're overseeing the formulas that equals a lot of money is what I meant.
That's true. That is true.
Now, and I don't know much about Pinal County yet. I'm learning the more I do this show. But I'm from Maricopa County, so I watch that a little bit closer. But here, what hired full-time staff do they have at the assessor's office?
It's approximately 60 folks, and I think around 15 are certified appraisers who go out and look at properties, and the rest are basically people who handle the paperwork that comes through the flow of the office.
So they can't actually go visit every single house.
No, they don't.
So how do they come up with that?
Well, it's a long process, and it is complex and convoluted on purpose, I believe,
Okay.
so that taxpayers have no clue how they're actually assessed
Well,
their
that's
value.
why I'm asking, because I've had myself and a lot of other people are saying our housing prices went down, our taxes are going up, our assessed value is going up. How can this be? So how complicated can a formula be when we're just looking at the bottom line? How can you get to that kind of a number?
Oh boy. Well, we could spend a couple hours just how they arrive at a value.
Just make it kind of simple.
It's not possible.
It can't make it simple.
This is basically rocket science. Is the way they've
Oh.
done it. But I'll give you a nutshell.
That'll work.
Okay, when you buy a house, you have a certificate of or affidavit of value that is filed with the county. $100,000, let's say.
At
Do
the
you
time
make that
we
out
purchase-
yourself?
The escrow company,
buyer and seller.
Oh, okay.
The buyer and seller have to fill one out and sign it.
and the title company forwards it on to the assessor's office. At that point, then it's thrown into the mix, and the way each property is aggregated depends where it is in the county. So, for instance, in Santan, we have 5 or 6 submarkets just for Santan, whereas Saddlebrook, which is way down south, is a very homogeneous area that has one market area of the county. So, the way the law is written is that they look backwards 18 months for the sales, and they aggregate all the data for an area, and until 30 sales go one way or the other, then that starts to tip the values either up or down. So it's always in retrospect, and it's also weighted by a certain number of sales in that submarket. So therefore, that's one aspect. And the second thing is you can have exemptions if you're a veteran, if you're a widow, if you're, there's a whole list of things that could lower your property taxes. If you're agriculture, It's $9 a thousand instead of whatever the current mill rate is. So it's, I mean, if you get your house, your place like Joe's here, he might go out because he's got animals.
My place is worth $15.
You might be able to get it down to the agricultural rate because you have that nice herd of cattle out there. So the point is, it's arbitrary, capricious. Okay, and that's just one level I started with. The second thing is then the range of what they call the actual cash value is from 60 to 82% based on state law. And actual cash value has nothing to do with market value. So then the county's goal in Pinal is to raise the rate of the ratio, I should say, to be 82% of the actual cash value. In other words, at the highest possible rate, which means your taxes will go up regardless of what the market's doing at the moment, because a lot of people's houses in this county are assessed at a 60% ratio to actual cash value. So I could get into all that, but it's amigo when you really start listening to it. It's just like, oh my God, I can't believe this.
So how can they start at 60 and then raise it to 82? Is that where the capricious part comes in?
Yes.
Okay. And I had a client who in his area had his taxes go up, and he made his appointment, and he went down and he pled his case, and they froze his taxes. But he said you really do have to hammer, and you do have to keep at it and go down in person, and he was retired also.
Here's the dirty little secret. The way the law is written, they rely on the taxpayer who gets the bill to go in and complain about their taxes. Because they know that there's 250,000 parcels in Pinal County, probably 3 times as many in Maricopa, and the law is written so that, hey, this is what we think it is. Tell us if we're wrong.
And most people don't know how to complain.
Well, exactly.
Right.
And
or most people are working.
Yes.
And by
the way, Betty from Gold Canyon called in and wants to know if she can go to a website that you have so she can look over your stuff.
My credentials?
Yes, sir.
wolfforaz.com. WOLFFORAZ.
And I'll go ahead and put that up on the screen for all you people watching. So you can go ahead and see it, wolfforaz.com.
And how did you pick up all of this? I mean, it sounds like you've already worked in the assessor's office because you seem to have a grasp on the formulas enough to, more than Mark and I have, I'm sure. So, right, Mark? And so how did you pick up all of that?
Well, a couple of reasons. I've lived in 3 different states and owned properties in different states. Minnesota was pretty bad. California is quite simple because of the GANA initiative that was passed in 1978. They made it very transparent, very easy.
That's the Prop 13, right?
Prop 13, exactly. Starving the beast is what they hoped, And then I bought an investment property here in 2004, 2003, I can't remember exactly what year, from San Diego where I was living at that time, and got my first property tax bill, and I said, this is harder than Chinese arithmetic. I had no clue what they were how they were billing me. And so I started digging into it and trying to find out what was going on. And then my wife and I moved here last February, bought a place in Santan for our permanent residence. And I decided, I started going to the Republican meetings and finding out what was going on as an activist. And they said, really, we need somebody to run for assessor because that place is so difficult to deal with. And when nobody understands how they're taxed, and they won't tell us and so forth. And, it was just one of those opportunities kind of came along. And so I just dedicated myself to learning everything I could about how assessments were done. And there's some really bright people in the county who do understand. They've been at it for 30 years. And there's the Tax Foundation has a very good publication. But what you come away with is it's totally arbitrary and capricious.
So what can you do about it?
Well, if I could wave a magic wand,
no,
which I don't have.
Right, no, just you win. What can you do?
Well, the first thing that I think is really important is letting people know exactly how the tax system works and how we arrive, or the county arrives at the value they assess you at, and why the number seems to have no relation to what the market's doing. And I think, actually, I went down to the assessor's office as a citizen and said, why isn't this on the website, where you could figure out, type in your parcel number and figure out who the taxing authorities are, plus what your sales ratio was. And we don't want people to have that, is what I was told.
Really?
So
we want you to come down here and talk to us. We don't want to put it on the website.
So our ability then
that
to
really
have
motivated
clear
me to run.
I was going to say our ability to have clear understanding of the laws and a clear understanding of money that's coming out of our pocket is being denied us intentionally.
Yes, and it's very much like the IRS tax code, which is 5,000 or 50,000 pages of disaster. It's in dire need of change and reform. In the short term, what I can do is give people, like for instance, the website should have, because when you get your tax bill, it shows like water district maybe, or fire district, school bonds, and all that sort of thing that they're charging you for. And the way that works is you get your assessed value. That's part of your tax bill. And then these districts send a bill to the county and say, hey, collect this for us. Oh. And they have to. And so if nobody goes to the water board meeting, if you have a public water board here, most of our are private in Santan, but some of them are public. If nobody goes to those meetings when they're doing their budget and says, hey, you're not going to raise my water bill rates and tack it on my property tax, or we're going to get rid, because most of those people are elected or appointed and they can be removed. But if nobody goes there and makes a stink, it just gets sent right up to the county, and county says, add her on, and away we go. And the board, of course, their role is, well, we have a budget and we want to spend this much, so what's the mill rate going to be for all this aggregate data we have? And so we are the second highest tax per thousand county in the state.
Oh, really?
Little Pinal County.
Well, this has maybe something to do with Lee that just called in and said, will you help the farmers? We're dying. Please help us with the rates. The current assessor you can't even talk to, and it's impossible to do anything, and he feels Pinal County does not care.
He's right. Until it changes, that it will stay that way. And that's exactly what I intend to do. But
so Pinal
I'm
County
not there yet.
Thank you, Lee.
Pinal County does not care about someone like Lee and their concerns about the costs and how it's affecting their bottom line.
No. Look, I'm going to be a partisan here for a second, if I can. This county has, since 1912, has been a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic Party. We've had two people elected countywide as Republicans. One, Paul Babu. The other one, Chad Roach, is clerk of the courts. The rest of the time, this county's been run just the way that the opposing party wants to run it, and they can charge what they want, and nobody stops them. And so they've had a nice little cash cow thing going. It's very, very nice for them.
Same with county supervisors. Have most of the county supervisors been Democrats in Pinal County?
Every one of them.
Is Brian Martin?
Wasn't.
But he wasn't elected countywide either. I'm sorry. Yeah, he was the first Republican that won a district seat. You're right. My mistake.
Okay.
My mistake.
All right, because that.
But he was always outvoted 2-1.
Oh, I see. So he was a Republican voice,
but it didn't matter.
but didn't make as big of an impact.
No, in fact, he got in a lot of trouble from the Republican activists because they thought he should do more. And he said, look, what can I do? I'm always outvoted 2-1, so I got to go along with some of the stuff if I want something for my own district. He was a practical politician. I understand, but a lot of people were upset that he wasn't more principled. Okay. But he's gone now, so.
Yeah, that is tough because one may wonder how much influence an assessor can have on that process. So tell us.
Well, there's two levels. One is making sure that the transparency is there.
Yeah, and that's important. By the way, I appreciate that because I wasn't even aware of that problem in Pinal County because I don't own property there. I don't live there.
But it's true in every county in the state.
Maricopa County?
Maricopa is just as bad.
Well, a lot of the farmers out here, that have bought, they paid $100,000 for their 300,000 acres that they've been farming for years. Now their tax bill, is $1 million a year. They can't farm anymore. I mean, just my front acreage out there, I pay 16% on because I don't have a property. I don't have a house on that. I mean, the taxes are crazy. And that call was from Bruce and said, Farm Bureau is following your campaign and will be involved soon. Not quite sure what that meant. It sounded positive. It didn't sound like a negative thing.
Well, being from the Valley of the Jolly Green Giant in Minnesota, I'm very happy to have the farmers on my side because it put me through college.
Absolutely.
Ho, ho, ho.
So what are they doing with the money that they're gouging the citizens?
Oh, my God. Well, let me give you one example. And again, I'm not going to be on the county board, so I don't make the spending decisions. But we spend about $76 million on 1,400 people for long-term care in this county.
Wow.
And the budget is about $335 million, and $73 million goes to 1,400 people.
Wow.
Well, why don't we go ahead and jump into a quick commercial,
and
we'll get right back
wonder
and
why they need to provide their own care.
Start learning some more about
right into your sweet spot.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. Yeah.
Money and motivation with Nancy Flemming. Special guest, of course, Doug Wolf, running for Pinal County Assessor, and absolutely always a. What do we call you, Mark?
Debonair.
We call him the
outspoken. Someone call me outspoken.
The main man.
All right.
Mark Winsor. All right. Pay attention to our sponsors. That's why we stay alive here. And
Join us
we'll
right
be
after the break.
right back with you.
Santan Motorsports, located in Queen Creek, specializes in off-road ATVs, dirt bikes, UTVs, side-by-sides, street bikes, and provides performance work. Santan Motorsports is your local dealership for off-road parts and accessories. They provide and pride themselves on excellent customer service and a staff that understands all aspects of the off-road business. Come in and browse our dealership and find those parts and accessories you've been looking for. Check our website, santanmotorsports.com, for monthly specials as well as used equipment. Santan Motorsports, your one-stop shop for sales, service, and knowledgeable staff. Located in Queen Creek on Power Road and Santan Boulevard, or call 480-988-0580. Santan Motorsports, we're here for you. Our family pets are such a big part of our lives. That's why Kelly's Critter Clips of Queen Creek and Sun Lakes has been providing pet grooming services for over 10 years. Your dog's comfort is very important to us, so we take the time to treat your pet with care, love, and professional attention it deserves. We welcome any size and breed and feature shampoo and conditioning, styling, flea and tick dips, ear cleaning, nail trimming, and so many other services that will leave your pet looking good and smelling good and feeling great, all at an affordable price. Located in Queen Creek and Sun Lakes, call now for an appointment, 480-655-5066. Kelly's Critter Clips. Hi, Marie here for wannasing.com. Are you looking for professional DJ or karaoke services for your next holiday party or get-together? wannasing.com can provide the best in sound, lighting, and a professional MC to host your next event. Whether it be a company party, birthday party, wedding, or any occasion, wannasing.com is ready to provide the fun and make it a night to remember for years to come. Call 480-664-8801. That's 480-664-8801. Mention this radio ad and receive a special discount for your next fun event. wannasing.com.
You will be terminated if you touch that dial. This is Arnold, and I listen to Brian Martin Shaw every Thursday. So tune in, or I'll break your finger off, stick it in your eyeball.
Are you having plumbing or septic problems? No worries. Call Cartwright's Queen Creek Plumbing and Septic Service. Been in the Valley since 1996. Family owned and operated. Proudly serving East Valley and surrounding areas. With a full range of services from drain cleaning, septic tank pumping, general maintenance and repairs, inspections for the sale of your home. They provide excellent and courteous service for all your plumbing and septic needs. We're not satisfied till you are satisfied. Licensed, bonded, and insured. Call today. Cartwright's Queen Creek Plumbing and Septic Service. Contact Denise at 480-987-8051. That's 480-987-8051.
Hit the beat now.
Well, welcome back to Money and Motivation. You are here with Mark Winsor, attorney, and with Joe, Nancy Flemming, your host, and our special guest, Douglas Wolf, candidate for Pinell County Assessor, who is trying to help us untangle the mystery behind our property taxes, why they're so high, why they go up, where the money goes, and how did we get here. So, Can you tell us a little bit, and I know you said it's convoluted, but how much of this occurs at the state level with legislation and how much of it occurs at the county level with legislation?
Okay. The Department of Revenue is controlled by the state legislature, at least allegedly, and they promulgate the regulations under, I think it's Code 42 of the Arizona statutes. And they're the ones, the legislature decides what the range of the sales ratio can be, what formulas we're supposed to use as the assessor's office, who can get exemptions like the widows and veterans and so forth. So they set the kind of the framework on how the job is done. They hand it over to the Department of Revenue, hands it over to the assessors and said, okay, here's your framework. You send your people out in the field and do your data analysis, and then you give that number to the county board. And the county board then at that point says, okay, we can charge between this and this as part of the per thousand rate on a property's assessed value. And what generally they do is they say, well, this is how much money we want to spend, so this is where we're going to set the rate to make sure we get that much in the door. And as far as different classifications of property and so forth, there are judgment calls, whether or not it's really agricultural property or not. That's probably one of the things that the caller was talking about.
Who makes that judgment?
Usually the assessor's office in the county. The Department of Revenue says, well, this is what we consider to be agricultural property, but when it comes down to where the rubber meets the road, there's always somebody's got to make a decision.
Right.
So do you need 3 cattle or 2 emus? I don't know.
So the reason we're seeing property taxes go up is
because the assessed value ratio is the sales ratio. They're trying to get it to the high end of the ratio.
So
for
they
everybody.
are just charging a higher percentage, because if we're seeing from what you were saying.
Yes, and that's one aspect. They have a goal of 82%, according to the last thing I saw from the county, and which is on the high end. And then, of course, they can raise the ratio as part of how they tax it. So if it's at 82% plus the mill rate is high, your property can go down dramatically in value, and you still pay more taxes.
I've known people that have moved from Maricopa County to Pinell County, and Pinell County does have a reputation, and they just say, gosh, I wished I would have known this. My property taxes are twice what they were in Maricopa County.
Yeah, and then you get people from back east who say, geez, these property taxes are unbelievably cheap, like Texas or New Jersey or those kind of places, because it's all relative. But for the state of Arizona, our property taxes are quite high.
Right. Okay, so what, given this framework as an assessor, I know you want to make full disclosure as much as possible on the website, but so that people will know, so suppose someone listens and they think, hey, you'd be great. We don't want you getting elected, and then having people say, oh, you didn't do your job. So what's the framework within which the assessor can operate? Let's suppose someone like you gets in there that sounds like you want to be an activist to reduce people's taxes and help people, so we don't lose. I mean, it'd be terrible if people go out of business, like Joe was saying, or not be able to afford their properties because of taxes. So what can you do?
Well, I have a limited role, but there are things I can do. I'm a big advocate of private property rights, and taxation is the power to destroy people. So looking at what California did with Prop 13 and the GAN initiative, where they basically gave you, and this ties into your business, which is a fixed framework of what my costs are going to be when I retire, for instance, on my property. Right. That's what caused that to pass in California. So they kept raising the rates because the value were inflating, and they just said, hey, let's just take the money. Mm-hmm. So we could look at, in the overall grand scheme of things, if I could wave a magic wand, like I was saying earlier, I would change the whole system and start over. I mean, basically.
Seems like there's a lot of systems that need to be just thrown out and start over.
We have a lot of demosclerosis in this country, in a way, overrepresented in a way, because there's a lot of issues like that, like you say.
But I don't understand how elected representatives, and I know I'm being really naive here because, of course, especially within my line of work, but you're elected representative, you're elected by people to look out for the benefit of your constituency, and yet what we're hearing is we have rules being made behind the scenes, so to speak, that are to the detriment of the constituency. And so, again, what do we do if we get a few people in there? And
in Pinell County, we're going to have 5 supervisors next time around on the ballot. And if 3 of the 5 are what I would consider to be conservative.
Well, fiscally responsible, who care about what people are paying.
Whatever context you want to call it.
Right. Conservative. We'll call it conservative.
Okay. Then I think you'll see a dramatic change in the way things are done in this county. If it turns out the other way, I think things will be business as usual.
Yeah, because one of the challenges is just the philosophy between the liberal and the conservative. If the conservatives believe in smaller government and less taxes, then you get more conservative people in all positions. You'll see less taxes and smaller government. But if the liberals, whose outspoken policy is more benefits, and that's how they sell themselves, let's give benefits. Well, benefits cost money. Money comes from taxes. So the only way to give those benefits is to increase taxes on all levels. And so yeah, it's just a philosophical difference.
But if we've been in that, now you're running for this office, so if we take that and say, okay, for all of these years, and we take Mark's example and say all these years we've had people being elected whose idea was more taxes and more benefits, would you say that the citizens of this county or any other county that's been in this process are receiving more benefits?
I'd be hard pressed to say they really got a lot more benefits. All you have to do is drive down Hunt Highway and you'd have to say, where'd the money go?
I have asked myself that question.
I mean, that is a very pregnant example of the fact that there's no tax dollars being spent on the infrastructure. The money's going somewhere.
Is there an accounting? Is there a website that a person could visit to see
the
what's
county
happening?
treasurer has the budget. You can go online and get it and download it.
Aren't we getting the county treasurer on here one of these days, Joe?
We can
We're
do
gonna
that.
Try to. Yeah, we should, based on this. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, we have two people running in the county.
Right.
It's Stephen Boyd and then the current office holder who's.
Well, because
been in
I'm
there
sure
quite a
what you're
while.
saying on the assessor here, even though you're running for Pinell County, is probably true in most counties.
As far as what you can do to affect
Right,
change.
what you can do and what you're up against and what you. I mean, let's suppose you're on the other side of the fence. You could then, within your office, push property taxes higher and push towards that 82% limit.
Correct.
Okay, but you also, where you are, can help push it down more and try to push that percentage you're talking about lower, yes or no, or is it up to the supervisors?
In 2010, the assessor's office proposed to the board, the current board at the time, to raise everybody's sales ratio to 82%, the high end of the scale. That's the policy of the county right now, which means it will automatically raise more tax dollars.
I see. But that wasn't put to a vote to the people. It was just the county supervisors that voted to do that.
Right.
So do the citizens of the state, do we need to try to raise up our own Prop 13? Was that beneficial in California?
Oh, yeah, it worked great. I mean, from doing the real estate business there, it was easy to transact where people would say, well, geez, the prices are outrageous here for the housing, which it is, but then you had a predictable level of 10 years, you could project out pretty much what your property taxes would be, even 20 years. Mm-hmm. You can't do that in any other state that I know of. And I could be wrong. I don't think there's any state that doesn't have property taxes. I haven't looked into it that closely, but that would be a nice place to live. But the point is, right now, there's no. If you're trying to financially plan for retirement, it's very difficult in a state that can raise property taxes, ad infinitum.
Now, describe for our listeners. Most listeners don't know these types of things. Describe for our listeners the impact that cities and school boards can have on property taxes.
Well, yeah, there's sub-districts or taxing authorities in your area. So for bonding, for instance, that's used when they propose a bond and it passes. It has to pass by vote. Then it's a percentage of a. There's two. There's the primary value in the the tax. What the other value I just mentioned earlier, I can't remember the top of my head, but the primary value is what the bonding authority is based on. So there's two different assessed values for your property depending on what taxing authority is putting the burden on you as a taxpayer. So the bonding, school board is pretty easy. I mean, they're the ones who vote, and they say out to the people, say we need new schools, vote for the bond or not. So you have an up and down. At least the public has a say there. The fire districts and the water districts and any other taxing authorities, hard to find out where they meet, hard to find out who they are. And, you have to be, as a citizen, you have to be really aggressive.
Well, and most citizens are so busy, they don't worry about stuff like that because they're so busy.
Like me, I look at it and think, doggone, why is this going on? And then I go to work the next morning. But this even affects
And they're
people.
counting on that,
They do. Well, I mean, even renters, because if you've got a landlord, they're paying all of these fees.
Of course.
And so the renter is still involved in paying this, even though it's indirectly, it's because it's going to the owner of the property.
It's just a cost to do business, so the owner just passes it on in the rent, of course.
Right. Now, to get totally philosophical and very, very, very fundamental here, I don't think that did our Constitution specifically address property taxes? I felt like the Founding Fathers were more trying to have us have the right to ownership. That's why they were giving land away. And
well, the 10th Amendment leaves those rights or leaves those decisions to the states. Because at the federal level, they said, well, they didn't even have an income tax back then, if you remember, back in the good old days.
But they allowed taxes. So at the federal level, it merely says taxes are allowed, and then it leaves it down to state
to do whatever they would like.
So the 10th Amendment gives them more latitude, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got plenty of latitude.
And
People have fought that many, many times. I've heard so many arguments about the IRS being unconstitutional. They lose every time.
Right.
They even go to jail, some of them.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
who's the celebrity
So they really
just went? Wesley Snipes?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Wasn't? Yeah, I think it was Wesley Snipes went to jail because he was a tax protester.
So no,
Wow.
really,
So
the
they
answer.
really don't address it. They just leave it up.
Well, they address
to
it. They say
they just leave it up to the states.
So have the power to raise taxes. So they do have the ability. The IRS certainly is legal. That's been in front of the Supreme Court. So the real fundamental question Douglas allured to a little bit earlier, it's a philosophical difference. I mean, he was struggling to say, am I conservative? Because it is conservative. That's the difference. Not that all conservatives would work hard to lower taxes. That's unfortunate because they should. That should be the background, the backbone, if you will, of every conservative. That should be one of the platforms they stand on. I don't know if everyone does. They should, because that's what a conservative fundamentally should believe in, is lowering taxes, decreasing the size of government, because it's way out of... it's not just counties. It's at almost every level we're out of control as a country, it feels like. One of the hardest things to do is give somebody a tax with the thought that it will be later reduced. A temporary tax thinking it'll reduce.
That's an oxymoron.
It's hard. It's very tough, because no matter how you twist and turn it, those monies are spent, and everybody in that chain, from the consumer who's getting a tax benefit from it, to the politicians who are fueling by promising benefits, to the administrators who live their jobs on that money, right?
Part of the friction.
Yeah.
Except
for example,
for
the question is, could that 60, you've got 60 people in the staff in the assessor's office, could it be reduced with more computerization and more organization? Could the staff be reduced? That's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't even know if you know the answer.
At this point in time, I can't answer that because I'm not there.
But you understand that from a pure philosophical, very few liberals would even look at that question.
Oh, yeah, you don't want to cut jobs.
Well,
That's
I'm
right.
saying
That's exactly right.
Except for the people paying it. I am sure that if the County Board of Supervisors just came out and said, we're just going to, across the board, cut property taxes in half, there'd be a lot of people really happy about that.
Not if at the same time they said we're going to have to cut our budget, and because of that, these programs are being dropped in the county.
Yes, the greatest trick of taxation is to give a few people a benefit and spread the cost out among thousands. So then that few people, whenever they're threatened, they're the most vocal, and they go down to the meetings and they get up on the hind legs and bray at the moon.
Exactly.
And the politicians say, well, geez, they're causing all this trouble, and it's only 10 cents per, whatever, and so they just spread it out, and soon you just keep spreading until you got a nice pile of manure.
And how many? That's true. And how many of the tax that spread across many? How many of them are showing up to the meetings and making their voice heard? Well, until we had Tea Partiers and others getting their voices raised, there wasn't that many. And so
there's no agreement in government to cut spending.
That's right.
Well, but
I
I
mean,
think,
that's
the taxes and I think the fees, and I think one of the reasons we're seeing the Tea Party is because it's getting to be so burdensome. It's starting to be like, gosh, we're paying so much, when will it stop? And you're starting to see such a disparity between those who do pay and the ones who probably could contribute and do not. I'm not talking about the ones who can't. We all understand there is a difference, and I think maybe that's why we're seeing some of it. We're seeing a lot of monies being taken without the right to be represented on it.
But isn't it true that right now the federal government is taking less percentage of our income than it has in the last 30 years, right today, because they got Social Security is reduced, right, by 2%. You're withholding because they're trying to stimulate the economy. You still have the Bush tax cuts in place. You still have all kinds of things. And so as a percentage, the federal government is taking less than it ever has. But it's still spending at the rate that it was and going up, so we're just borrowing the difference. So we're living on borrowed time. I think the Tea Party recognizes this equation won't work. over
Oh,
time.
no, it won't work.
But right now, we're not paying a lot in federal taxes.
Oh, we're paying too much. So just because
we
it's-
may be, but
right,
I'm just saying, as a
right.
percentage, we're not.
So you're right, but it's still as a percentage more than it should be.
Well, it's
not
that's the
reduced
argument.
enough in many of our minds. In my mind, for example, I look at it and I think there's still a lot of room left for improvement. And if these tax cuts expire, I agree with many voices out there that we're going to see some terrible challenges in our country.
Well, and there's fees that started next year, that especially on, quote, higher earning people, that are rarely addressed, like the higher Medicare premium being one.
Right. Well, how about this? You're in the retirement business. Right now, I'm paying less into Social Security, right?
Correct.
Doesn't that mean on the back end, when I go to draw out, I'll have less to draw on?
You're going to have less anyway.
Yeah, but I
If
understand.
it's-
But
it
they're
doesn't
deliberately
matter.
reducing their liability by doing this, aren't they?
You know what the government always says when they do anything? It's a drop in the bucket. And I think what they're saying is it's not going to make any difference. The liabilities are so high.
But $76 trillion among friends.
That's true. That's true. They're talking about when the IOUs run out that they'll be paying 78% of the benefits that people are expecting to receive on Social Security. A lot of people
Anybody who
want to
believes
just-
Social Security will secure your retirement is a fool. And that's been true since 1938.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. There's
I hope you tell your clients that, too.
No, I don't dare. I do try to do planning. I do broach the subject that they need to be prepared. It will be reduced. I'm also would not be surprised. This is just me talking. There's no proposals. But if we look at history, we sometimes see it repeats itself. What happened to railroad retirement years ago? Well, it got dovetailed with Social Security. So will the day come when people will scream?
Federal retirements, too.
In federal retirement, that
Got
people will
pushed in.
start to say, it isn't fair. It isn't fair that Joe or Susie gets a pension and I don't, and they get Social Security. Why isn't it fair? But
Because people don't save money.
That'll
that's why.
start screaming, and more than likely, I have warned some of my people with pensions that may happen, using railroad and federal as an example. But that's about as far as I go, because if you talk about Social Security just not being there to people maybe 55 and older, it's not a really happy topic. People in their 40s pretty much expect it not to be there.
Yeah. More people under 30 believe in UFOs than believe in the viability of the Social Security system.
No, they're just figuring they're just going to be paying to...
That's a fact.
Ironically, I saw one
Yeah.
last night.
I saw that. That was a great posting.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So,
Well, tell us about it.
Well, it was the Padrone that
Douglas, tell us what influence can a Pinal County assessor have on that big problem? We're
mean
talking about
the federal level.
federal,
Well,
state. I mean, there's a
Just-
lot of levels of
Yeah,
taxation
any level,
in our country.
any level.
Well, I think it's a duty of every elected official at any level to have a philosophical core that says, this is what I believe, and since you elected me, I'm going to make public statements in that regard.
There you go. See, I've asked that question to so many state and local politicians, and very few have an answer. Most of them say, we're not the feds. That's their answer most of the time. And I bring this
that's
up.
a cop-out.
That's a good
That is,
answer.
Douglas,
Yes.
that answers what I like hearing. That is the thing that I've tried to encourage them to say, listen, you can have a voice. Think about it. If the local politicians would let their voices be heard loud to our federal policymakers, I believe there would be more of a change. Because no matter how you twist it, really, even though the federal may be less than it's been in 30 years, whatever, it's still the biggest chunk of what I pay in taxes overall.
Sure.
If you look at the gas taxes, and I mean, there's a lot more than just income tax on that federal level. And out of my pocket, more of my dollars go there than go to local
Yes.
taxing authorities.
Well, not just that, but if we have, if you're the type of person that, if elected, would make public statements, it would be instructive for the public. Because, like I said, I do my thing, but I don't know what goes on in the county assessor's office. How could I? I'm busy doing my own continuing education classes and following everything else that's going on in the sphere people expect me to have a grasp of. And so
You're busy working to pay your taxes. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But if someone like you were to stand up and take your position to...
And aren't we glad that you do?
Yes, how would you get a job otherwise?
That's right.
But to educate us, to take a position that says, I'm in the county assessor's office and this is what I see, and make your voice heard, then the rest of us would say, and you'd have to have trust and credibility, of course, it couldn't be self-serving, but the rest of us could say, oh, well, gee, county elect, hopefully, if you are who you say you are, Douglas says this, and this. And because he has this much credibility then we pretty much know this is right. And the population as a whole, we need statesmen. We just don't have statesmen anymore.
Or as many. We have some. Hey, Joe, did we get another call come in?
Teresa from Santan Valley says, I've been paying into Social Security my whole life. I'm 44 years old. What's the issue? Why do I have to be concerned? Should I be worried?
Yes. Social Security.
That sounds like a whole nother show.
That is. We should do a show just on Social Security. Why don't we do a show on Social Security?
Do a lot of people actually have no idea?
Yeah, they have no idea. And the actuaries...
They think it's an insurance policy.
And it is, and it's actually just a tax. Because what's happened is we've been lied to. Oh, darn.
Oh, surprise.
Yes, exactly. And so originally it was set up as a trust fund, and had it been kept a trust fund, we'd be fine because so much more money was going into it for so many years. But, of course, we had the fox watching the hen house, and many years ago they took the money out. And, so there's an IOU. So the IOUs are balancing out what's owed by Social Security, and every year they reassess it and say, oh, now Social Security will go broke in such and such year and such and such year. And what they really mean is when the amount of IOUs is gone, then at this point in time, Social Security benefits will be cut by 70 to 78% of what you think your benefit should be. But they're trying to keep it in place for older retirees, but I'm not persuaded. I'm really not persuaded, because what do you do with a program that people have paid into? They've done their part, just like there's the woman who called in. She's doing her part. You're paying in. You're expecting to get something when you retire. And what's going to happen? The government finally fesses up and says, oh, gee, we stole all the money. I don't know how they're going to get around that.
Is that when they come and start installing microchips in our neck and stuff like that?
The RFIDs and such.
I don't know. Did you see that? Did you see the internet thing on that? That was pretty interesting.
There was I think 61 or 62 somewhere, there was a Supreme Court decision on Social Security, which basically says it's not a contract. It is a program the federal government put in place, and the Congress has the right to change it any time it wants.
Which they have been doing.
So therefore, you have no contract with the federal government with the money you've put into the system. That is Supreme Court ruling, and that's set in stone. So people can think that they're going to get exactly what they paid in based on what the law says today, but the law can change anytime Congress wants to change it.
And that's how it was misrepresented to the American public, because you'll even have people today complaining about why should somebody get Social Security, and they're trying to begin to lay it off as an entitlement program. So and I wouldn't be surprised if someday it also became more of a sliding scale. Something has to be done.
It'll be means tested. That'll be one thing they'll
do.
And it is an entitlement. You're entitled under the law. That's what it says. But they can change the law.
Right. And it's not for the people paying in, like you and me and everybody else.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like an entitlement program. It feels like
a tax.
You're putting in. Well, again, it's taken me a while to get my head around the fact that it isn't what it was represented to be. That it is a tax. That it is just a tax.
It's a wealth transfer
that has
program.
A different name.
Look at the first woman who got the first person who got a Social Security check. She got her first. She worked for like 2 months, and she retired, and she paid in like $21 the first 2 months or something like that. Her first check was $23. She died at 100 and some, and she took out like almost $200,000 or some outrageous number. You can look it up and you can find it yourself. It's amazing, and that's been the true of the program ever since it started.
But to show the change in the mentality, when I first started, I would still come across people that were quite elderly, and I actually met a couple of people, or if I met people whose parents refused the Social Security checks. We did have a really strong.
It was welfare, and people knew it.
It was, and we really did have a really strong.
Because if you only paid in a month.
Yeah, a strong society that was very independent and said, I don't take help from anybody in government. You can just go ahead and keep your check, and we don't need it, and don't give it to us. And we had people turn it down. Now came across an old Elvis Presley movie when Social Security was new, and it was about the father trying to get the money. It was set in Florida or something. It was interesting to see that many years ago the take on how all this stuff was getting started anyway.
Now, Douglas Wolf, we've got about 30 seconds left.
What would you like
to
say?
Tell us what you can do to make a difference in Pinal County.
Well, as I've been saying over and over, one is the transparency and integrity in the office, and explain to the board, so whoever those 5 supervisors are, exactly what's been going on and how it's affecting the taxpayers day to day in this county, and what they can do, working with what I can do in my office to set a policy of are we going to be a high tax county, or are we going to try to start reducing property taxes in this county? And that's a decision that they'll make collectively, because I don't have a vote there. But I will give them the information so they can make an informed decision, which they don't have right now.
All right, thank you. You've been a great guest. Thank you.
That was very informative. Thank you for coming.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Douglas Wolf. Again, candidate for Pinell County Assessor. You have been with Money and Motivation. We hope you have a wonderful evening, and good night.
Good night. God bless.
Are you experiencing computer problems? Is your computer running slow? Bogged down with viruses and spyware? You need a reliable and knowledgeable, trustworthy computer service company. Contact Computers, Networks, and More, located in Santan Valley. Get your computer or laptop running in top condition by a certified technician with 20-plus years experience and beta tester from Microsoft. Computers, Networks, and More provides repairs and solutions to any computer-related issue, whether it's software, installation, troubleshooting, updates, or tune-ups. You can trust Computers, Networks, and More. Contact Jeff Monday through